So it seems that they've patched the patch that updates the update. Supreme Commanders are restored to their former glory in Warhammer 40k, and it might appear that we have some of Warhammer 40k's first rules that might well affect Lionel Johnson if and when he's released. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the bits that Games Workshop is doing to update the Arks of Omen pack. This is about the time when they try and iron out any major issues with the rule set in FAQs and Errata. I've already made a video on the channel today about the document, though only a couple of hours after I'd uploaded that, Games Workshop have basically made another stealth update to their pack, and it basically gets rid of one of the biggest issues that I was very surprised to see them left out of the initial FAQ. Let's talk about that and then the possible Lion teaser. So first up, they basically stealth updated their FAQ again. I believe that went up around about 12 o'clock GMT. And again, it doesn't seem that they've actually shared it publicly with their social media or anything. They might be waiting until they're absolutely certain that this is the final version of the FAQ, I suppose. It is up on their Warhammer community website though. What happened was the FAQ for the Arks of Omen dropped yesterday, and it was a kind of surprisingly light touch. I released that video talking about the couple of changes that they made. The only real significant thing that they fixed was the Drukhari patrol detachments. They now have their own special way of making their armies in 40k. Out of the things that were missing, Supreme Commanders were perhaps the single most important one. The issue being that the Supreme Command detachment is completely gone in Arks of Omen missions, so it means that you have to include the Supreme Commander in the main detachment. These are the overall faction leaders, things like Abaddon the Despoiler, Zarek the Silent King, Rabute Gilliman, Mortarion, and so forth. The issue that some people were having was that previously you could include them in their own detachment, and it meant that you could include, say, Zarek the Silent King alongside Novok Necrons, for example, or Commander Shadowsun leading some Borkhan Tau. In Arks of Omen, though, there was an issue created. It meant that you had to include the Supreme Commander alongside their same army in the main detachment, and it actually meant it fell foul of a bunch of Codex Army Construction wording, say for example not being able to take multiple different dynasties of Necrons within the same detachment. It meant that if you were playing Zarek the Silent King, you could only choose to play Zarekan Dynasty Necrons. I guess that is the fluffy choice for him, but it was massively more restrictive compared with the way that they had it previously, where he could basically be leading any sub-faction. It did seem like an unintentional oversight to me, though I did see a few people arguing that it might be a bit of a good thing, and maybe in some ways a bit of a flavour win having the Supreme Commanders lead their own fluffy forces. I feel like if Games Workshop had done that from the start of 9th edition, nobody would have cared that much. I think it's more the change that disturbs people. Say for example, if you happen to have collected a Novok Dynasty Necrons list, and you were running the Silent King alongside them, suddenly being able to say that that's no longer legal is pretty rubbish. And it just seems a bit mean to change from one case of affairs to the other towards the end of 9th, particularly as if they hadn't been like that, far fewer people might have gone out and bought and painted up the Silent King. In any case, the fix comes with quite a big FAQ in the Arks of Omen document, and it comes in a few different parts. First up, they state that you can only include one Supreme Commander in an Arks of Omen detachment, though I'm a little bit uncertain as to any of the factions really properly have two. I guess if you built a weird army around the Heretic Astartes keyword for Magnus and Mortarion, that might work. That isn't something that most people tend to do, though. Otherwise, I kind of wonder whether it might be in preparation, potentially for Vashtor if he winds up being a Supreme Commander for the Demons. I could kind of see that as a bit of an unaligned Chaos God of his own, and just potentially Gilliman and the Lion as well, which we'll have more on that shortly. Beyond that, where relevant, they've basically targeted the Supreme Commanders that are locked to one dynasty or sub-faction, and basically said they're good to run regardless. The Silent King can be taken outside the Zarekan dynasty, Abaddon the Despoiler can be taken in any Chaos Legion, Shadowsun can be taken outside of Tau Sept, Belisarius Call can be taken outside Mars, and Rabute Gilliman can be taken outside of Ultramarines for any chapter. They haven't needed to specify every single Supreme Commander, as a lot of them aren't sub-faction locked, say for example Trajan Valoris or Morven Val. Neither of those are locked to one sub-faction or shield host or anything, and the same goes for Mortarion and Magnus within the Thousand Sons and Death Guard. Rabute Gilliman's perhaps an interesting case, as it seems that he still has to be Space Marines, and he can't just be used to lead an Imperium army in general. I guess that does make a fair bit of sense thematically, though seeing as he's basically the Lord Commander of the Imperium at the moment, you certainly could make the argument that he should be able to take command of just about any Imperial force, including say leading a host of Adeptus Custodes if it made sense. Currently though, he doesn't have the Agents of the Imperium or anything. If they did happen to update his rules anytime soon and gave him that, then I guess that could help out. In the designer's commentary for it, they basically spell out that all these Supreme Commanders don't prevent the sub-factions from gaining their special rules. Say, for example, Abaddon and Emperor's Children won't ruin their Legion trait. though they do say for the relevant ones, Guilliman, Call, and Shadowsun, they only get their sub-faction traits if they do happen to be taken alongside their fluffy allies, so Guilliman in Ultramarines, Call in Mars for example. Overall, in terms of meaningful changes to the game, I feel like Zarek and Abaddon are the ones to watch the most. Both of those are quite strong models that were quite commonly taken in sub-factions outside their main one, so I guess this is a relative win for them, and particularly for the Silent King and Necrons, who was really quite a competitive choice and wouldn't have liked being locked to Zarekan only. Overall seems like a good fix, keeping them more or less as they were in the spirit of the rule before, though some of them will be competing with detachment slots and things compared with other things in the army, say for example Shadowsun competing against tower commanders with their restriction. Finally though, perhaps one of the most interesting teasers of the update is the actual specific wording around Guilliman's restrictions, as they aren't actually listing him as Rabute Guilliman. The actual wording says that you can include an Adeptus Astartes Primarch unit in a chapter detachment even if it doesn't share the chapter keyword. Now currently in Warhammer 40k, Guilliman is the only loyalist Astartes Primarch, so giving this generic wording seems super pointless unless at some point you are going to update the status quo and there might just happen to be an old knight returning of the Dark Angels to shake things up a bit. To me, this really does sound like they're future-proofing for an imminent release of the Lion, and it seems to be something that's been coming about kind of recently. They also had sort of similar ruling coming out of those boarding actions downloadable rules. They said Primarch's there as opposed to Guilliman himself. I honestly do suspect that this is future-proofing for a reasonably imminent release, particularly in the context of all the other teasers that Games Workshop has been dropping fairly recently. If so, though, I guess that these are the first Warhammer 40k rules that directly affect the Lion, and that rule is that you would be able to run him basically in any Space Marine chapter, at least initially. You wouldn't have to keep him locked to Dark Angels if you didn't want to, though I strongly suspect that as with Rabute Guilliman, he's going to be far better to run in Dark Angels, as a lot of his command abilities are likely to be locked to the Dark Angels themselves, as opposed to things that just freely affect any Space Marines. Guilliman's really big rerolls are perhaps one of the main reasons to take him, and they're locked to Ultramarines. Let me know what you make of that though. Do you think that Games Workshop is future-proofing here for an upcoming Primarch release? So anyway, broadly good news for a bunch of really iconic centerpiece models there. Let me know what you make of the Supreme Commander traits and whether or not that changes anything for your army. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to keep up with Games Workshop's news and updates, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I will certainly be keeping these videos coming. I do tend to post 40k stuff just about every day. Finally, if you've been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description below if you're interested in helping support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. It is what allows me to keep these videos coming every single day, so if you're enjoying, any support is massively appreciated. Links in the video description if you'd like to check it out. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.